Welcome back to Clearly Ambiguous, the podcast where we look at the international relations and realize that alliances are just tinder matches with nuclear weapons. I'm your host, and today we are talking about a fascinating psychological condition affecting the Western policy planners. It's a condition I like to call a strategic agoraphobia. It's a crippling fear that a country that you want to use as a shield against your biggest enemy might actually figure out how to build its own shield and stop needing you. Specifically, we are looking at India's northeast. Now, if you listen to the official Washington or London press briefings, the script is always the same. India is a vital strategic partner, a shining beacon of democracy in the Indo-Pacific, a magnificent counterweight to China. We love India. We want India to grow big and strong, except not too strong and definitely not in the Northeast. See, it turns out Western policy analysts prefer India the same way toxic partners prefer their significant others. Full of potential, slightly vulnerable, and deeply dependent on them for emotional, and by emotional I mean military support. So, why does the sight of New Delhi pouring concrete, building bridges, and laying broad gauge railway tracks in places like Arunachal Pradesh or Mizoram give Western planners a massive collective migraine? Grab your coffee or your strategic uranium stockpiles because it's time to make the clear completely ambiguous. Let's start with a geography lesson, because geopolitics is just real estate with higher casualties. If you look at a map of India, the northeast is attached to the rest of the country by a tiny strip of land called the Siliguri Corridor. It's nicknamed the Chicken's Neck. It is roughly 22 kilometers wide, and to put it into perspective, that is shorter than the average commute in Mumbai, and roughly the distance a Western politician can walk before changing their mind on environmental policy. For decades, this has been India's ultimate geographic vulnerability. If China's army decided to roll down from the Doklam Plateau and pinch the Chicken's Neck, the entire northeast gets cut off from mainland India. Now, if you're a Western defense planner, how do you view this vulnerability? Publicly, oh, what a tragedy. We must help our Indian friends. And privately, excellent built-in leverage point. Think about it, as long as India feels physically vulnerable right there, it has to keep whispering sweet nothings into the ears of the Quad. It has to buy billions of dollars of Western fighter jets and integrate its naval surveillance and look longingly across Atlantic whenever Beijing moves a bulldozer 3-inch closer to the border. The Chicken's Neck was the perfect tether to keep India tied to the Western security canopy. But then, New Delhi did something incredibly rude. They started building things. For the last few years, the Northeast has gone from neglected border zone to an absolute construction frenzy. Mega bridges like the Bogey-Beal, all-weather tunnels, advanced air bases capable of landing fighter jets right on the frontier, and railway networks replacing old narrow tracks with heavy-duty broad-gauge steel. Suddenly, the Chicken's Neck isn't looking so fragile. It's getting hardened, it's getting muscles, and the Western analysts are panicking. Because a self-reliant India that can defend its own borders on its own terms is an India that doesn't need to ask permission before signing a trade deal. The leverage is diluting, and nothing terrifies a global superpower more than a partner who can survive a breakup without losing their own house. But it gets better. Developing the Northeast isn't just about putting up walls against China. It's also India's front door to Southeast Asia. It's a literal launching pad for New Delhi's Act East policy. India wants to connect the Northeast overland directly to Myanmar, Thailand, and the massive ASEAN markets. We are talking about massive infrastructure projects like the Kaladan Multinodal Transit Project and India-Myanmar-Thailand Trilateral Highway. Sounds great, right? Global trade, economic integration, prosperity, enter Western foreign policy. The West looks at Myanmar and sees one thing: the military junta and The Western playbook for dealing with governments they don't like is incredibly consistent. It has one step sanctions. You sanction them, you isolate them, you release a very strongly worded press statement written by a 23-year-old intern in Washington, and you wait for them to magically become a textbook democracy. Well, it has never worked. But hey, it makes for great domestic press. But India lives in the actual neighborhood. New Delhi looks across the border and realizes if we don't engage with whoever is running Myanmar, two things happen. First, our northeast remains economically isolated. Second, China steps in, buys the whole country, and builds naval bases right next to our maritime borders. So India does what any pragmatic neighbor does. They sit down with the junta, they shake hands, and they keep building the highways, and this drives Western policy planners absolutely insane. From their perspective, India is ruining the moral purity of the sanctions regime. Washington is trying to starve Myanmar out, and India is casually paving a 4-lane highway right into their living room. It creates beautiful, hypocritical friction. The West wants India to fight China, but they want India to do it while adhering to Western-approved moral checklist that ignores the basic laws of geography. Yes, India, please counter Beijing, but do not talk to the country that stands between you and rest of Asia. Use the power of positive thinking instead. Now let's talk about the favorite tool in Western foreign policy shed: human rights and indignity narratives. Now let me be very clear. The northeast of India is incredibly diverse. It has hundreds of unique tribes, languages, complex histories, and it has also had its fair share of painful ethnic friction and internal conflict. These are deep internal structural challenges that India has to navigate. But look at how these challenges are processed through the lens of the Western think tanks and NGOs. Whenever Delhi tries to centralize control, build a border fence, or rapidly industrialize the Northeast, the Western legislative bodies suddenly develop a profound hyper-specific interest in regional demographics of Mizoram, Nagaland, Arunachal Pradesh. And why? Because internal fault lines are geopolitical currency as long as a region is unstable, fractured, and underdeveloped. It remains a topic of international concern. It gives Western entities a permanent handle to pull whenever they need to apply a little normative pressure on New Delhi. Oh, you won't agree to our terms on intellectual property rights in this trade deal? Well, let's publish a 400-page report on religious freedom indices in Northeast India and hold a congressional hearing about it. But when you build roads, when you bring internet connectivity, when you stabilize local economies and integrate the administrative machinery of the state, those old insurgencies start to dry up. The economic desperation that feeds conflict starts to disappear. And as Indian state solidifies its sovereign grip over its border, the West loses another lever. It's hard to lecture a country about its unstable, ungoverned spaces when those spaces have better cellular connectivity and 5G speeds than rural Pennsylvania. So let's zoom out to the grand strategic chessboard. What is the ultimate joke here? The West's ideal version of Asia is a neat, tidy bipolar system. On one side, you have China. On the other side, you have United States and its loyal, compliant regional managers. In this script, India's job is to stay in its lane, keep Beijing busy on the Himalayan border, buy Western defense equipment, and keep consuming Western digital platforms. But a fully developed, economically vibrant, strategically secure Northeast changes the entire geometry of the continent. It turns India from a South Asian power looking inward into a continental East Asian player looking outward. It opens up an independent trade routes that completely bypass Western-dominated maritime checkpoints. In short, it accelerates what Indian policymakers love to call a multipolar world. An order where Washington doesn't call all the shots, Beijing doesn't get to dictate, and there is an alternative, an order where New Delhi is a pole in its own right, beholden to no one, structurally dependent on no one, and perfectly capable of securing its own backyard. And that, my friends, is why a simple bag of cement mixed in Arunachal Pradesh makes a foreign policy analyst in Washington sweat. It's not that they hate infrastructure, it's just that they prefer when they hold the blueprint. Thanks for tuning in to Clearly Ambiguous. Remember, if geopolitics make sense, you clearly aren't paying close enough attention. Hit subscribe, leave a review that we will definitely use to optimize our algorithms, and we will see you next time. Stay safe, stay skeptical, and keep your neck protected. Thank you for watching.